This is my audience for today. Self-harm is an increasingly devastating issue in today's society where people are intentionally resorting to hurting themselves in an effort to relieve emotional pain. Self-harm prohibits people from experiencing life to the fullest in Christ because they often have a hard time grasping the fact that Christ's love is unconditional for them, and that we are called from 1 Peter 5:7 to cast our anxieties on Him. And people who struggle with self-harm often take all that guilt and shame on themselves, which resorts to cutting and hurting themselves in other ways. Each year, 1 in 5 females and 1 in 7 males engage in self-injury. John 13:34 tells us to love one another as I have loved you, so you must love one another. So what does Christ's love look like to us? He pursues us relentlessly. He loves us regardless of our shortcomings, and He always extends grace and mercy to us even when we mess up. I struggled with an addiction to self-harm for 5 years before somebody decided to extend the love of Christ to me, where I then gave my life to Jesus and was able to get help and redemption from the self-harm. Self-harm is a heartbreaking, addictive habit that prohibits those held captive by it from experiencing the joy of salvation in Christ, and it needs to be addressed by us as Christians in order to show that the hurting that you're going through is greater than that God is greater than the hurting that you're going through. Now let's take a closer look. People who harm themselves often have emotional difficulties that lead them to believe that the only way that they can relieve that pain is through inflicting harm on themselves. Many people have a hard time coming to grips on why somebody would want to intentionally hurt themselves, but a girl who used to struggle with self-harm told mentalhealth.org that when she would hurt herself, she, quote, felt a warm sense of relief as though all of the bad things were flowing out of her, and it made her feel alive and real. So that might give you some perspective into why somebody might do that. According to mentalhealth.org, the average age of somebody who struggles with self-harm is between the ages of 11 and 25, and the average age to start hurting yourself is the age of 12. Some reasons why some people might self-harm is due to bullying, tension at home, parents going through a divorce, isolation, low self-esteem, or feeling unwanted. This leads me to my next point, that there are several ways that people hurt themselves, and getting help for them can sometimes be difficult because they become masters of disguise, and they often lie in order that people won't know that they're struggling. Some ways that people hurt themselves is they will cut, burn, or scald their skin. They might bruise or scratch their body. They might break their bones, or pull their hair out, or sometimes they even swallow poisonous substances. Warning signs to look for in people who could possibly be self-harming is when it's warm in the summer, if people are constantly wearing long sleeves or long pants because it might be trying to cover up scars. Also, sometimes they'll wear large amounts of bracelets on their wrists because they don't want people to see the bruises or the scars on their arms. Or sometimes they will even avoid activities where their body parts will show, such as going swimming. People who are addicted to self-harm are very ashamed and embarrassed by it, so they often don't ask for help, and that's why it's so important for us as Christians to be aware of the warning signs and aware of the reasons behind why people do this in order that we can extend love and grace to them. So what can we do to reach out to those who are so engulfed in this addiction? We can be educated on the warning signs and always keep a keen eye out for those who are exhibiting these habits, and most importantly, we can show them love. The worst thing you can do to somebody who's struggling with self-harm is to become angry and frustrated with them, because just as every addiction, it takes time to get over it. Ephesians 4:2 tells us to be completely humble and gentle, and to be patient, bearing with one another in love. Jesus never gives up on us, and He never stops pursuing us, and we should be showing that same kind of love to people who are struggling with this sort of addiction. A practical way that you can help people who could be struggling with self-harm is to just show love to everybody that you come in contact with, because you never know what people are going through, and just as Jesus would, we are called to love everybody. A girl who used to struggle with self-harm and had gotten help for it told mentalhealth.org that she feels a lot more confident. She's learned to be more open about her feelings and be able to move on. She felt that without people knowing about it, that she was being held back. She said that she's been able to come out of herself and explain what she does and to make sense of it, not having to lie and keep covering up what she did. It's important for us to give people a safe haven to be able to talk about these issues and talk about their addictions. Because Romans 12:15 tells us to rejoice with those who rejoice and to weep with those who weep. So we should be rejoicing in victory with those who are overcoming self-harm, but also get into the deep sadness of it with them and help them come out of it and weep with them. Self-harm can be dark and scary, but Jesus bled on the cross so that we don't have to. Love your neighbor as yourself and bear with the failings of the weak. These are commands that God gives us. We should always be loving and extending grace to people, and there is hope in self-harm. I encourage you to refuse to be ignorant to this issue, and I encourage you to refuse to let people struggling with this addiction to suffer in silence. Be a voice for them.